They ripped her name off the roster 3 minutes before takeoff. She stood frozen on the tarmac, watching a pilot with half her flight hours climb into the cockpit she'd bled for. 9 months of preparation. 400 hours in that Apache. Gone in a single sentence from a colonel who wouldn't meet her eyes. No explanation. No appeal. Just whispers that spread like wildfire through 45 pilots. Too young. Unstable. Cracked under pressure. She was 20 years old. The youngest Apache pilot in Army history. And they were burying her alive. But when a 4-star Admiral seized the radio and spoke 5 words to the entire base, every lie they told about her was about to explode. From which city are you watching today? If you believe in justice for those who serve in silence, subscribe and stay until the end. The desert sun had barely cleared the horizon when Lieutenant Maya Sterling pushed through the double doors of the pre-flight briefing room at Fort Ironhawk Air Station. The air inside was thick with tension and the smell of burnt coffee. Pilots stood in clusters around the flight roster board, checking assignments for Exercise Iron Thunder. This was the kind of event that could define a career. NATO observers. Pentagon brass. Live fire demonstrations broadcast to Allied command centers across 4 continents. Everyone knew what was at stake. Maya moved through the room with a kind of economy that came from years of discipline packed into a young life. She was 20 years old, lean and compact, with dark eyes that seemed to take in everything without lingering on anything. The youngest Apache pilot ever certified in Army aviation history, a record that followed her like a shadow she couldn't shake. The other pilots noticed her, but didn't engage. A few nodded. Most looked away. There was a distance around her that wasn't quite hostility, but wasn't warmth either. It was the kind of space people left around someone they weren't sure belonged. She stopped at the roster board and scanned the names. Apache 47 lead gunship for the close air support demonstration. Her name was printed next to it in crisp letters. 9 months of preparation had led to this moment. 9 months of simulator runs, live fire drills, coordination briefings with ground controllers, and endless equipment checks. She had flown that bird more than anyone else on the base. She knew its quirks, its strengths, the way it pulled slightly left during hard banks. It was hers in every way that mattered except on paper. She turned to head toward the equipment lockers when a voice cut through the low murmur of conversation. Sterling. Major Victor Harlan stood in the doorway to the operations office. He was a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s, with a face that looked like it had seen too many bad decisions and made peace with all of them. He didn't meet her eyes. Maya stopped. "Sir? Need a word outside." The room didn't go silent, but the quality of the noise changed. Conversations continued, but everyone was listening now. Maya could feel it like static electricity on her skin. She followed Harlan into the hallway. He walked a few paces away from the door, then stopped and crossed his arms. Still wouldn't look at her. "You're scratched," he said. Maya stared at him. "What not cleared for flight? Effective immediately. On whose authority command decision?" His jaw was tight. "Don't push it, Lieutenant. Major, I've been prepping for this sortie for 9 months. My pre-flight checks are done. The bird is ready." "I'm ready." "Not my call, Sterling." "Then whose call is it?" Harlan finally looked at her. There was something in his expression that might have been sympathy, but it was buried under layers of rigid professionalism. "Colonel Thorne. And before you ask, no, I don't know why. Orders came down an hour ago. You're off the roster." Maya felt something cold settle in her chest. The feeling was familiar. She'd felt it before in places she couldn't talk about, doing things that officially never happened. "Who's taking my slot?" Lieutenant Brennan. Cole Brennan. A decent pilot, competent, but he had less than half of Maya's flight hours and had never flown a live fire demonstration of this scale. He was 26, experienced enough to be safe, inexperienced enough to be unremarkable. Maya didn't say any of that. She just nodded once, slowly. "Understood, sir." Harlan looked like he wanted to say something else. Instead, he turned and walked back into the briefing room. Maya stood alone in the hallway for a moment, staring at the scuffed linoleum floor. Then she followed him back inside. The briefing started 5 minutes later. Colonel Marcus Thorne stood at the front of the room, a wiry man with silver hair and a voice like gravel scraping concrete. He went through the mission parameters with mechanical precision. Weather conditions, flight paths, target zones, rules of engagement. When he got to the aircraft assignments, he paused. "Change to the roster," he said. "Apache 47 will be flown by Lieutenant Brennan. Lieutenant Sterling is reassigned to ground observation." 45 pairs of eyes turned toward Maya. She sat in the third row back, straight face expressionless. Ground observation. It was the kind of assignment you gave to students or pilots under disciplinary review. It meant standing in the tower with binoculars while everyone else did the actual work. Thorne didn't offer an explanation. He just moved on to the next item on the agenda. But the room had changed. Whispers started low and insistent. Maya could feel them like heat from an open flame. When the briefing ended, she stood and walked out without looking at anyone. She didn't rush, didn't hesitate. Just moved through the room like water finding the path of least resistance. Behind her, the whispers grew louder. In the hallway, 2 junior pilots stood near the water fountain. Lieutenant Derek Gareth, a tall kid from Montana with a sunburned neck, and Lieutenant Tara Inez, a sharp-eyed woman from New Jersey who flew transport choppers. They didn't notice Maya approaching until she was almost past them. "Heard she got flagged during psych eval," Gareth said. "Finally caught up with her." "I heard she froze during a training run last month," Inez replied. "Command doesn't trust a 20-year-old with live ordnance. Whatever it was she's done, nobody comes back from ground observation during a NATO exercise." Maya kept walking. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't break stride. Didn't turn around. Just kept moving until she reached the exit and stepped out into the brutal desert heat. The tarmac shimmered under the morning sun. Rows of Apache helicopters sat in perfect formation, their rotors casting long shadows across the concrete. Ground crews moved between them, running final checks, loading ordnance verifying systems. In the distance, the VIP area was being set up. Chairs and awnings for the NATO observers and Pentagon officials who would be watching the demonstration. Cameras were being positioned, sound equipment tested. This wasn't just a training exercise. It was a performance. Maya made her way to the command tower, a squat concrete structure with a 360-degree view of the airfield. Inside the observation deck was crowded with officers and technicians. She found a spot near the windows away from the main clusters of personnel. Someone handed her a pair of binoculars. She took them without comment. Below on the tarmac, Cole Brennan was doing his pre-flight walk-around on Apache 47. Maya watched through the binoculars. Brennan was thorough. She'd give him that. He checked the rotor blades, inspected the landing gear, examined the weapons pylons. But there was a hesitation in his movements, a lack of fluidity. He had to refer to his checklist 3 times for things Maya could do from memory. Chief Warrant Officer Elena Vance stood nearby with her arms crossed. Maya had worked with Vance for 2 years. She was old-school Army aviation, a Desert Storm veteran who'd seen more combat from the ground than most pilots saw from the air. She didn't suffer incompetence, and she didn't hide her opinions. Right now, she looked profoundly unhappy. Brennan climbed into the cockpit and started running through the systems checks. Maya lowered the binoculars and looked away. She didn't need to watch this. On the far side of this observation deck, two senior officers stood near the radio console. Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Webb, a slim woman with steel-gray hair and a reputation for ruthless efficiency, and Major Quinn Dalton, a former Apache pilot who'd moved into command roles after a crash left him with a permanent limp. They were speaking in low voices, but the observation deck wasn't large. Sound carried. "This is a mistake," Dalton said. "It's done," Webb replied. "We can't second-guess it now. Brennan isn't ready for this. You know that. I know that. Thorne knows that. It doesn't matter. It matters to the mission." Webb turned to look at him. "The mission will proceed as planned. Brennan is capable. He'll manage." And if he doesn't? Webb didn't answer. She just looked out at the tarmac, her expression unreadable. Maya stood near the window, staring at nothing. She could feel eyes on her. People were watching, wondering, judging. She'd been through this before. The scrutiny, the doubt. The quiet assumption that if someone in command didn't trust her, there must be a reason. It didn't matter that no one would say what that reason was. The absence of an explanation was its own kind of evidence. She thought about the last 9 months, the hours in the simulator, the coordination drills, the briefings where she'd walked the entire squadron through the mission profile step by step until everyone knew their role by heart. She'd done everything right. She'd been perfect. And it hadn't mattered. The radio crackled to life. "Tower, this is Apache 47 pre-flight complete. Requesting clearance for engine start." The tower controller glanced at the mission clock. 47, you're cleared. Stand by for coordination check." Maya watched through the window as the Apache's rotors began to turn. Slowly at first, then faster, until they were a blur against the pale sky. The sound was a low thrum that vibrated through the observation deck's reinforced glass. Then the radio crackled again, Brennan's voice tighter this time. "Tower 47. I'm showing a hydraulic pressure anomaly on the primary system. Need guidance?" The observation deck went still. Every head turned toward the windows. On the tarmac, Chief Vance was already moving toward the Apache, a diagnostics tablet in her hand. Webb stepped up to the radio console. 47 described the anomaly. Pressure reading is fluctuating. It's within tolerance, but it's not stable. Dalton swore under his breath. Webb shot him a look. 47 standby. Do not proceed with engine run-up. Ground crew is en route. Maya raised the binoculars again. She could see Vance climbing up to the cockpit, leaning in to talk to Brennan. She was pointing at something on the instrument panel. Brennan was shaking his head. Vance pointed again, more emphatically this time. The mission clock showed 18 minutes until scheduled takeoff. In the VIP area, NATO observers were starting to arrive. Pentagon officials in dress uniforms, foreign military attachés, people who'd flown halfway around the world to watch this demonstration. Maya scanned the hydraulic system through the binoculars. She could see the reservoir access panel from here. The angle was wrong, but she knew that bird. She'd spent 400 hours in that cockpit. She could picture the system layout in her mind, and she could see what the problem was. The hydraulic reservoir hadn't been fully pressurized during ground prep. It wasn't a mechanical fault. It was human error. A simple mistake that a rookie crew chief might make. Except Vance wasn't a rookie, which meant someone else had touched that system after her final checks, or the pressurization had been deliberately skipped. Maya lowered the binoculars. Her hand moved toward the radio console, then stopped. If she called this in, if she corrected the problem from here, it would look like interference. Like she was trying to sabotage Brennan. Like she was proving everything the whispers said about her. That she was unstable, unreliable, too young to handle the pressure. She set the binoculars down on the console and stepped back. On the tarmac, Vance was still arguing with Brennan. The mission clock ticked down. 17 minutes. Webb keyed the radio. 47 status update. Still diagnosing, ma'am. Crew chief is running a full systems check. How long unknown at this time? Webb turned to Dalton. Get me Thorne, now. Dalton pulled out his phone and walked toward the far corner of the observation deck. Maya watched him go. Then she looked back out at the tarmac. That's when she saw it. A black convoy rolling through the main gate. 3 vehicles. No escort. No advance notice. They moved across the airfield with the kind of authority that didn't need permission. The base security didn't even slow them down. They just waved them through. Maya felt something shift in her chest. She knew what that convoy meant. She'd seen vehicles like that before, in places that didn't officially exist, carrying people whose names weren't in any database. The lead vehicle stopped near the command tower. The rear door opened, and a figure stepped out into the harsh sunlight. She was tall, probably in her early 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, and a chest full of ribbons that caught the light like a constellation. 4 stars on her collar. Dress whites so crisp they looked like they could cut glass. Admiral Catherine Cross. Maya's hands tightened on the edge of the console. Admiral Cross was a legend. Naval aviation pioneer. First woman to command a carrier strike group. She'd crossed over to Joint Command 3 years ago and had been instrumental in some of the most sensitive operations of the last decade. Operations that Maya knew more about than she was supposed to. Across the observation deck, someone gasped. Webb turned toward the window, her face going pale. Dalton, still on the phone, froze mid-sentence. Colonel Thorne came running out of the operations building like a man who'd just been told his house was on fire. He crossed the tarmac at a near jog, straightening his uniform as he went. Admiral Cross waited, hands clasped behind her back, watching the chaos around the grounded Apache with an expression of clinical detachment. The 2 officers met near the VIP area. Thorne saluted. Cross returned it with the bare minimum of effort. Then Thorne started talking. Fast and urgent. Maya couldn't hear the words, but she could read the body language. Thorne was explaining, justifying, defending. Cross listened without moving, without reacting. Her face was a mask of perfect neutrality. Then Cross said something short. Quiet. Thorne stopped talking. He looked like he'd been struck. Cross turned and started walking toward the command tower, toward Maya. Webb stepped away from the radio console, smoothing her uniform. Dalton ended his phone call and stood at attention. The other officers in the observation deck shifted uncomfortably, like students who'd just realized the principal was coming to their classroom. The door to the observation deck opened. Admiral Cross stepped inside. The room snapped to attention as one. As you were, Cross said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. It had the quality of someone who never needed to raise their voice to be heard. She scanned the room, her gaze moving from face to face until it landed on Maya. Lieutenant Sterling. Maya straightened. Ma'am, walk with me. Cross didn't wait for a response. She just turned and walked back out onto the exterior observation platform. Maya followed, aware of every eye in the room tracking her movement. Outside, the heat was oppressive. The observation platform overlooked the entire airfield. Apaches lined up in formation, ground crews scrambling around the disabled 47. VIP observers starting to murmur. In the distance, the desert stretched out forever, pale and merciless. Cross stood at the railing, looking out at the scene below. She didn't speak for a long moment. Just watched. Maya stood beside her, waiting. Finally, Cross broke the silence. "Who grounded you, Major Harlan, ma'am, on orders from Colonel Thorne? Did they give you a reason?" "No, ma'am." "Did you ask for one?" "No, ma'am." Cross glanced at her. "Why not?" Maya looked out at the tarmac, at the Apache she'd trained on, at the pilots who'd whispered about her, at the officers who had pulled her without explanation. "Because I already know why," she said. Cross studied her for a moment. Then she nodded. Just once. Like Maya had confirmed something she'd suspected. "The hydraulic issue on that Apache," Cross said. "You saw what's wrong, didn't you?" Maya hesitated. "Yes, ma'am. But you didn't call it in." "No, ma'am." "Why not?" "Because if I had, it would have looked like I was trying to undermine Lieutenant Brennan. Like I was proving everyone right about me being too young, too unstable, too dangerous to trust." Cross turned to face her directly. "And what are you, Lieutenant Sterling?" Maya met her eyes. "I'm the pilot who should be in that cockpit, ma'am, and we both know why I'm not." Cross held her gaze for a long moment. Then she turned and walked back into the observation deck. Maya followed. Inside, Cross moved directly to the radio console. Webb stepped aside. Dalton backed up. Cross picked up the handset and keyed the transmit button. "All stations, this is Admiral Cross. I am assuming operational authority over Exercise Iron Thunder effective immediately." The channel crackled. Somewhere on the flight line, someone dropped a tool. The sound echoed across the tarmac. "I want Colonel Thorne, Major Harlan, and Lieutenant Colonel Webb in the command tower. Now!" Cross set down the handset. The observation deck was silent. No one moved. No one breathed. Webb cleared her throat. "Ma'am, I'm already here." Cross looked at her. "Then you can wait." 3 minutes later, Thorne and Harlan arrived. They stood in a line near the radio console, backs, rigid faces, carefully blank. Cross looked at each of them in turn. "Explain to me," she said, her voice perfectly calm, "why Lieutenant Sterling was removed from the flight roster." Thorne opened his mouth closed. It tried again. "Ma'am, it was a command decision based on operational security concerns. What concerns? I'm not at liberty to discuss the details, ma'am. You're not at liberty." Cross's tone didn't change, but something in the room shifted. "Colonel, I have oversight authority for every classified operation run through Joint Special Operations Command for the last 2 years. If there are operational security concerns regarding Lieutenant Sterling, I would know about them. So I'll ask again. What concerns?" Thorne's jaw worked. "Ma'am, with respect, the decision was made in consultation with intelligence oversight." "Which division?" Silence. Cross waited. The observation deck felt like it was holding its breath. Finally, Webb spoke up. "Ma'am, the concern was that Lieutenant Sterling's presence in a high-profile exercise might raise questions we're not prepared to answer." Questions about what? Webb glanced at Thorne. He gave a tiny shake of his head. She looked back at Cross. "About her recent operational history, ma'am." Cross's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes went very cold. "I see," she said. She turned to Maya. "Lieutenant, have you been informed of any restrictions on your flight status?" "No, ma'am." "Have you been notified of any pending investigations or disciplinary actions?" "No, ma'am." "Are you currently qualified to fly the AH-64 Apache?" "Yes, ma'am." Cross turned back to Thorne. "Colonel." Unless you can provide me with documented evidence of a legitimate safety or security concern within the next 60 seconds, Lieutenant Sterling will be reinstated to full flight status. She paused. Your choice. Thorne looked like a man watching his career burn. Ma'am, I must protest. Protest noted. 60 seconds, starting now. No one spoke. The mission clock on the wall ticked down. 55 seconds. 50. 45. Thorne's hands clenched into fists at his sides, but he didn't speak. 30 seconds. 25. 20. Webb looked at the floor. Harlan stared straight ahead, his face carved from stone. 10 seconds. 5. Cross picked up the radio handset again. This time she switched it to the base-wide channel. Every radio on Fort Iron Hawk Air Station would hear what she said next. Every pilot. Every crew chief. Every officer. Every observer in the VIP area. Maya's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Cross keyed the transmit button and spoke 5 words that would change everything. She flew the Viper run. 5 words. They landed like artillery fire across Fort Iron Hawk Air Station. Maya felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Her hands gripped the edge of the console so hard her knuckles went white. Admiral Cross wasn't finished. 12 weeks ago, Cross continued, her voice carrying through every speaker on the base. Lieutenant Sterling flew a classified interdiction mission in hostile territory. Solo. Night. 0 aerial support. Complete radio blackout. The observation deck had gone absolutely still. Webb's face drained of color. Thorne looked like a man watching his own execution. Her Apache took sustained fire from multiple positions, Cross said. Ground-based anti-aircraft, small arms, RPG fire. She neutralized all hostile contacts, extracted a 7-man Special Forces team under direct fire, and returned her aircraft to base with 8% fuel remaining and critical damage to both engines. On the tarmac below, visible through the windows, ground crews had stopped moving. Pilots stood frozen beside their aircraft. Even the NATO observers in the VIP area had gone quiet. The mission was deemed too sensitive to acknowledge, Cross said. Her record was scrubbed. She was told to resume normal duties and say nothing. No medal, no commendation, no public record. Cross paused. The pause filled every corner of the airbase with suffocating silence. She flew the Viper run, and she did it at 20 years old. Maya couldn't breathe. 12 weeks of silence, 12 weeks of whispers and doubt and isolation. And now, in 30 seconds, Admiral Cross had torn it all open. The radio clicked off. Cross set down the handset and turned to face Thorne. "Colonel?" she said, her voice dropping to something quiet and dangerous. "Would you like to explain why a pilot who executed that mission was pulled from a routine demonstration flight?" Thorne's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Harlan had gone pale. Webb was staring at Maya like she'd never seen her before. Ma'am, Thorne finally managed the classification protocols were designed to protect operational security. Cross cut him off. Not to destroy the career of the pilot who saved 7 American lives. The mission parameters were compromised, Thorne said. Intelligence indicated that hostile actors might have identified Lieutenant Sterling as the pilot. Her presence at a high-profile NATO exercise could have created a targeting opportunity. Cross took a step toward him. "Did you share that assessment with Lieutenant Sterling?" "No, ma'am." "Did you inform her that she was being protected rather than punished?" "No, ma'am." "Did you do anything to counter the rumors that have been destroying her reputation for the past 12 weeks?" Thorne's jaw tightened. No, ma'am. Cross nodded slowly. So you allowed a decorated combat pilot to be treated like a disciplinary problem. You let her squadron believe she was unstable, unreliable, unfit for command, and you did nothing to correct that impression. Ma'am, with respect to the classification is my responsibility now, Colonel, not yours. Cross turned to Maya. Lieutenant Sterling, she said you are reinstated to full flight status, effective immediately. Maya's voice came out steady, despite everything. Yes, ma'am. Get in your cockpit. The words hit Maya like a physical force. For a moment, she didn't move. Couldn't move. Then Chief Vance's voice crackled over the radio from the tarmac below. Tower, this is ground crew. Apache 47 is showing green across all systems. Hydraulic issue has been resolved. Cross glanced at Maya. I believe that's your aircraft, Lieutenant. Maya was already moving. She pushed through the observation deck door, took the stairs 2 at a time, and stepped out onto the tarmac. The heat hit her like a wall, but she barely noticed. 45 pilots lined the edge of the flight line. They'd heard everything. Every word Cross had spoken. Every classified detail that had been buried for 12 weeks. They were staring at her. Not with suspicion anymore. Not with doubt or judgment, or the quiet cruelty of people who thought they knew something they didn't. They were staring at her like they'd never seen her before. Maya kept walking. Brennan was standing beside Apache 47, his helmet tucked under one arm. His face had gone white. Lieutenant Sterling, he said. His voice cracked on her name. I didn't know. I swear I had no idea. Maya stopped in front of him. You weren't supposed to know, she said. None of you were. But the things I said. The things everyone said. We thought I know what you thought. Brennan looked like he wanted to sink into the concrete. Ma'am, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Maya held his gaze for a long moment. Then she reached out and took the helmet from his hands. Don't be sorry, Lieutenant. Be better. She walked past him to the Apache. Chief Vance was waiting at the cockpit ladder. Her weathered face split into something that might have been a smile. Heard what you did, ma'am, Vance said quietly. Whole base heard. It's still classified, Chief. Vance snorted. Not anymore, it isn't. Maya climbed into the cockpit. The seat conformed to her like it had been waiting. Her hands moved across the controls with the kind of precision that couldn't be taught, only earned through hundreds of hours, and the kind of pressure that turned training into instinct. She ran through the pre-flight sequence. Every switch, every gauge, every system checked and verified. The hydraulic readings were stable now. Vance had fixed whatever had gone wrong. Or whatever had been made to go wrong. Maya pushed that thought aside. She'd deal with it later. The radio crackled. Apache 47. This is Admiral Cross. Maya keyed her transmit. Go ahead, ma'am. The demonstration profile calls for a standard close air support run. Suppression of enemy air defenses, precision strikes on designated targets, coordination with ground forces. Yes, ma'am. Cross paused. Show them what you can do, Lieutenant. Maya felt something shift in her chest. Something that had been locked down tight for 12 weeks. Roger that, ma'am. She powered up the engines. The turbine spooled with a rising whine that built into a roar. The rotors began to turn slowly at first, then faster, cutting the air with a sound that made the ground crews step back. Tower, this is Apache 47, Maya said into the radio. Pre-flight complete. Requesting clearance for departure. The tower controller's voice came back immediately. 47. You are cleared. Flight path Alpha. Weapons hot at range marker. There was a pause. Good hunting, Lieutenant. Maya lifted off. The Apache rose from the tarmac with the kind of smoothness that made it look effortless. She banked slightly, compensating for the crosswind, and accelerated toward the designated flight path. Below her, 45 pilots watched from the flight line. NATO observers tracked her movement through binoculars. Pentagon officials had stopped making phone calls. Everyone was watching. Maya pushed the throttle forward. The desert blurred beneath her as she approached the live fire range. Target arrays stretched across the sand sensor equipment, positioned to track every round, every missile, every decision she made. The exercise parameters called for a simulated close air support run. Ground targets, suppression of enemy air defenses, precision strikes on designated objectives. It was meant to showcase coordination accuracy and decision-making under pressure. Maya executed the entire sequence in 11 minutes. The first pass was textbook C-aid. She identified the simulated SAM sites, prioritized targets based on threat level, and engaged with a combination of Hellfire missiles and 30mm cannon fire that left nothing but smoke markers where the targets had been. The second pass was close air support. Simulated friendly forces pinned down by hostile fire. She came in low and fast, using terrain masking to avoid theoretical anti-aircraft fire, and delivered precision strikes on the designated enemy positions with a margin of error measured in inches. The third pass was pure demonstration, a high-speed gun run that showcased the Apache's agility and the pilot's ability to maintain accuracy under dynamic conditions. Maya put every round within the target zone while executing evasive maneuvers that would have been aggressive even in actual combat. In the VIP area, the British colonel had stopped taking notes. He was just watching his pen forgotten in his hand. A French general was speaking rapidly into a satellite phone. The Pentagon officials had formed a tight cluster, conferring in urgent whispers. Maya brought the Apache around for final approach. She could see the flight line below the rows of helicopters, the ground crews, the pilots who had doubted her. She set the bird down with the kind of precision that made it look like the landing gear had been magnetically pulled to specific marks on the tarmac. The rotors spun down. The turbines wound into silence. The dust settled. Maya went through the shutdown checklist with the same methodical care she'd used for startup. Every switch, every gauge, every system verified and secured. When she finally removed her helmet and climbed out of the cockpit, the tarmac was lined with pilots. They weren't cheering, weren't calling out. They were just there, standing, watching. A silent acknowledgement that said more than words could have. Gareth was the first to approach. The tall kid from Montana who'd been whispering about psych evals and disciplinary problems just 2 hours ago. "Ma'am," he said. His voice was rough. "I owe you an apology. The things I said, the assumptions I made, they were wrong. Completely wrong." Inez stepped up beside him. "We both were. We're sorry." Maya looked at them. She could have made them grovel, could have reminded them of every cruel whisper, every sidelong glance, every assumption they'd made without evidence. Instead, she nodded. "You didn't know," she said simply, "and you weren't supposed to." Apology accepted. Now get back to work. Relief flooded their faces. They saluted and stepped back. Chief Vance was waiting by the Apache, running her post-flight inspection. When Maya walked over, she didn't look up from her clipboard. "Bird performed perfectly, ma'am. No issues to report. She always does when you prep her, Chief. Helps to have a pilot who knows what she's doing." Vance glanced up, meeting Maya's eyes. For what it's worth, ma'am, I never believed the whispers. What made you so sure? Vance gestured at the Apache. Because I see how you treat the equipment, how you talk to the crews, how you move through pre-flight. You can fake a lot of things, ma'am, but you can't fake that kind of respect for the machine. Only comes from someone who's been in the fire and knows what it costs when things go wrong. Maya felt something tighten in her throat. Thank you, Chief. Just stating facts, ma'am. Maya left her to the inspection and headed toward the command tower. She needed to debrief to file her after-action report to face whatever administrative consequences were about to come crashing down. But before she reached the tower, a voice stopped her. Lieutenant. Admiral Cross stood near the base of the stairs, hands clasped behind her back. The VIP observers were still in the background, but she'd separated herself from them. Maya came to attention. Ma'am, walk with me. They moved away from the tower toward a section of tarmac that was temporarily clear. Cross didn't speak immediately. She just walked, and Maya matched her pace. Finally, Cross broke the silence. You know what happens now? Yes, ma'am. Inquiries, reviews, probably a formal investigation into the disclosure, all of which will conclude that I made the call, not you. You followed orders, nothing more. Maya glanced at her. Ma'am, with respect, they'll still come after me. Operational security, unauthorized disclosure. Even if I was following orders, they'll find a way to make it my fault. Cross stopped walking. She turned to face Maya directly. Let them try. The words were simple, but the weight behind them was not. This was a 4-star admiral with 3 decades of service and connections that reached into every corner of the Department of Defense. If she was willing to shield Maya, very few people would be able to touch her. But there was a cost to that protection. There always was. Ma'am, why did you come here today? Cross studied her for a moment. Because I was at the debrief for Operation Silent Viper. I read the after-action reports. I saw the gun camera footage. I know what you did out there, and I know what it cost you to stay silent about it. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I also know that the order to scrub your record came from people more concerned with political optics than operational reality. They didn't want questions about why we were running interdiction missions in that region, so they buried the mission, and they buried you with it. Maya's jaw tightened. She didn't respond. When I heard you'd been pulled from this exercise, Cross continued, I made some calls. Found out it was the same people. Same reasoning. They didn't want your presence here raising questions they'd have to answer. So they sacrificed you again. Ma'am, I knew the cost when I took the mission. Knowing the cost and accepting injustice are 2 different things, Lieutenant. Cross's voice was quiet but firm. You did your job. You did it brilliantly. And you were punished for it. That ends today. Maya met her eyes, even if it means exposing the operation. The operation was successfully completed 12 weeks ago. The intelligence objectives were met. The only thing classification was protecting at this point was institutional embarrassment. Cross gestured toward the VIP area. And now every Allied observer on this base knows we have a pilot who can execute that kind of mission at 20 years old. That's not a security risk, Lieutenant. That's a strategic asset. She let that sink in for a moment. You're reinstated, full flight status, no restrictions. And if anyone in your chain of command has a problem with that, they can take it up with me personally. Maya wanted to say something. Thank you felt insufficient. So did any other response she could think of. So she just nodded. Cross returned the nod. Dismissed, Lieutenant. Go file your report. Maya saluted. Cross returned it with the kind of precision that said more than words. Then she turned and walked back toward the VIP area, leaving Maya standing alone on the tarmac. Maya stood there for a moment, feeling the desert heat on her skin. the weight of the helmet bag in her hand, the reality of what had just happened settling over her like something physical. She flew the Viper run. And now everyone knew. The observation deck was nearly empty when she climbed the stairs. Most of the officers had dispersed, probably to make calls, file reports, cover their tracks. Only Dalton remained standing near the windows looking out at the flight line. He turned when she entered. "Hell of a flight, Lieutenant." "Thank you, sir. I owe you an apology. I should have pushed back harder when they pulled you. I knew it was wrong." Maya set her helmet bag on the table. "You were following orders, sir, same as everyone else. Following orders isn't always the same as doing what's right." Dalton's expression was troubled. "I flew Apaches for 15 years. I know what it takes to execute a mission like the one Admiral Cross described. And I know what it costs to keep that kind of thing quiet." He paused, measuring his next words. "For what it's worth, you have my respect and my support. If they come after you for this, you won't be standing alone." Maya felt something shift inside her. Not relief, not vindication, just a small, quiet acknowledgement that maybe finally someone understood. "I appreciate that, sir." Dalton nodded and left. Maya was alone in the observation deck now. She moved to the windows and looked out at the flight line. The Apaches sat in their rows, rotors, still waiting for the next mission. Ground crews moved between them, performing maintenance checking systems, preparing for whatever came next. It looked like any other day on any other base. But it wasn't. Everything had changed. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and looked at the screen. A text message from a number she didn't recognize. "Formal inquiry scheduled for 0800 tomorrow. Pentagon liaison will be present. Bring documentation for all flights in the last 6 months. Colonel Patricia Webb, JAG." Maya stared at the message. So it was starting. The official response. The bureaucratic machinery grinding into motion. She set the phone aside and looked back out at the tarmac. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. Tonight, for the first time in 12 weeks, she felt like she could breathe. Maya slept better that night than she had in 3 months. No dreams, no ghosts. Just the deep, dark stillness of someone who had finally stopped carrying a weight she was never meant to bear alone. She woke at 05:30, showered, dressed in her Class A uniform, and spent 30 minutes organizing the documentation Webb had requested. Flight logs, after-action reports, maintenance records, everything from the last 6 months bound and tabbed, and ready for inspection. At 0745, she walked into the base conference room. The space was already occupied. Colonel Webb sat at the head of a long table, her JAG insignia catching the overhead lights. Beside her was a man Maya didn't recognize. Civilian clothes, dark suit. The kind of face that belonged in rooms where decisions were made and people were ruined. He introduced himself as Marcus Chen, Office of the Secretary of Defense. Maya's stomach tightened. This wasn't just a base-level inquiry. This was Washington. "Have a seat," Lieutenant Webb said. "We're waiting for one more participant." Maya sat. The minutes ticked by in heavy silence. Then the door opened, and Admiral Cross walked in. The tension in the room shifted immediately. Chen straightened in his chair. Webb's expression went carefully neutral. Admiral Chen said, "We weren't expecting you." Cross took a seat at the opposite end of the table from Webb. "I have oversight authority for any inquiry related to classified operations under Joint Special Operations Command. This qualifies." Chen opened his mouth to protest. Cross cut him off with a look. "Shall we proceed?" Webb cleared her throat and opened a folder in front of her. "Lieutenant Sterling." She began, "This inquiry has been convened to review the events of yesterday's demonstration, specifically the public disclosure of classified operational details by Admiral Cross and your role in those events." Maya kept her voice steady. "Understood, ma'am. Let's start with Operation Silent Viper. Can you describe in your own words what happened 12 weeks ago?" Maya took a breath. She'd never been asked to tell this story. She'd been ordered to forget it, to bury it, to pretend it never happened. Now she had to remember. "I was flying solo night patrol in the Syrian border region," she said. "Standard reconnaissance. No contact expected. At 0247 local time, I received an emergency beacon from a special forces team approximately 18 kilometers from my position. What was the nature of their emergency? They'd been ambushed during a reconnaissance mission. Their extraction helicopter had been destroyed. They were taking fire from multiple directions and had 3 wounded, 1 critical. What did you do?" "I assessed the situation and determined that waiting for authorization would result in the team being overrun. I made the decision to deviate from my patrol route and engage." Chen leaned forward. "You violated your mission parameters." "Yes, sir." "On whose authority?" "My own." The room went quiet. Webb made a note. "Continue, Lieutenant." "I approached the team's position from the northeast using terrain masking to avoid detection. As I closed within 2 kilometers, I took fire from an anti-aircraft position on a ridge to my west. I engaged and destroyed it with a Hellfire missile." Chen was watching her with an expression Maya couldn't read. "I continued to the team's position and identified 2 additional hostile concentrations. One to the south, small arms and RPG. One to the east, technical vehicles with mounted weapons. I engaged both positions with cannon fire and a second Hellfire." Webb looked up from her notes. "How many hostiles did you engage? The after-action assessment estimated between 30 and 40 enemy combatants, and you neutralized all of them." "Yes, ma'am." "Alone?" "Yes, ma'am." Webb exchanged a glance with Chen. "Continue," she said. "Once the immediate threats were neutralized, I landed at the team's position. They loaded their wounded and we extracted under sporadic fire. I took 2 additional hits during departure. One to the tail section. One to the port engine housing." Maya paused. The next part was harder. "My fuel was critical. 8% remaining. The port engine was losing power. I calculated that I had approximately 14 minutes of flight time before total failure. How far was your base?" 17 minutes at standard cruising speed." "So you couldn't make it?" "No, ma'am. Not at standard speed." "What did you do?" "I pushed the engines past their rated limits, redlined both turbines, made it back with 2 minutes of fuel remaining and the port engine operating at 40% capacity." Chen let out a slow breath. "You should have crashed." "Yes, sir. I should have." "Why didn't you?" Maya met his eyes. "Because those 7 men were counting on me to get them home. Crashing wasn't an option." The room was silent for a long moment. Admiral Cross spoke for the first time since the inquiry began. "The gun camera footage from that mission is some of the most impressive combat flying I've seen in 30 years, she said. Lieutenant Sterling didn't just complete the mission. She executed it at a level that most experienced pilots couldn't match." Webb nodded slowly. "Lieutenant, after the mission, what happened? I was debriefed by intelligence officers. I was told the mission was being classified at the highest level. I was ordered to return to normal duties and not speak of it to anyone. Were you told why? No, ma'am. I was told that the reasons were above my clearance level. And you accepted that? Yes, ma'am. I'm a soldier. I follow orders." Chen shifted in his chair. "Even when those orders required you to accept damage to your reputation?" Maya's jaw tightened. "My reputation is secondary to operational security, sir. Even when your fellow pilots thought you were unstable, when they whispered that you'd failed a psych eval, when they assumed you'd been grounded because command didn't trust you. Even then, sir." Chen leaned back. That's either admirable discipline or profound foolishness, Lieutenant. Admiral Cross's voice cut through before Maya could respond. It's neither, Mr. Chen. It's what we ask of our soldiers every day. We ask them to sacrifice not just their safety, but their dignity, their reputations, their peace of mind. And then we act surprised when they actually do it. Chen turned to face her. Admiral, with respect, the classification protocols exist for a reason. They exist to protect operational security, not to punish the people who execute our most dangerous missions. The disclosure yesterday could have compromised ongoing operations. What ongoing operations? Cross's voice was sharp. The mission was completed 12 weeks ago. The intelligence objectives were achieved. The only thing that classification was protecting was the careers of the people who authorized a mission without proper support and then tried to cover up their mistakes by burying the pilot who saved it. Chen's face went red. Admiral, that's a serious accusation. It's a statement of fact. Webb held up a hand. Let's stay focused on the inquiry, please. She turned back to Maya. Lieutenant, were you aware that Admiral Cross intended to disclose the classified details of your mission yesterday? No, ma'am. I had no advance knowledge of the Admiral's actions. Did you request that she intervene on your behalf? No, ma'am. I hadn't spoken to Admiral Cross before yesterday. Webb made another note. So your first contact with the Admiral was when she called you to the observation platform? Yes, ma'am. And when she asked you to walk with her, did you know what she intended to do? No, ma'am. I assumed she wanted to discuss my grounding. But you didn't know she was going to make a public disclosure, no, ma'am. I was as surprised as everyone else. Chen leaned forward again. Lieutenant, I find it difficult to believe that you had no idea what was about to happen. Maya met his eyes steadily. Sir, I've spent the last 12 weeks following orders to stay silent about the most significant mission of my career. I watched my reputation get destroyed. I accepted a grounding I didn't deserve without protest. Do you really think I would have engineered my own vindication by violating the same classification I'd been sacrificing everything to protect? Chen held her gaze for a long moment. Then he sat back. No, he said quietly. I suppose not. Webb closed her folder. Lieutenant, based on this review, I find no evidence of misconduct on your part. You followed lawful orders from a superior officer. You maintained operational security under extremely difficult circumstances. Your conduct throughout has been consistent with military standards. Maya felt something release in her chest. Thank you, ma'am. However, Webb continued, there will be ongoing review of the classification protocols and the decision chain that led to the initial suppression of your record. That's not your concern, but you should be aware it's happening. Understood, ma'am. Chen spoke again, his tone different now. Softer. Lieutenant, off the record. What you did in Syria was extraordinary. The fact that it was buried for political convenience is a failure of the system, not of you. I want you to know that. Maya nodded. I appreciate that, sir. Webb stood. This inquiry is concluded. Lieutenant Sterling, you're free to go. Maya rose and saluted. As she turned toward the door, Admiral Cross fell into step beside her. They walked out of the conference room together down the corridor and out into the morning sun. Cross didn't speak until they were clear of the building. You handled that well, she said. I just told the truth, ma'am. The truth delivered poorly can still cause damage. You delivered it well. Cross stopped walking and turned to face her. Lieutenant, I want you to understand something. What happened to you was wrong. The system failed you. I can't undo that, but I can make sure it doesn't happen again. She paused. I'm recommending you for a commendation retroactive to the Viper mission. It won't be public. The mission details are still classified, but it will be in your official record." Maya didn't know what to say. "Ma'am, I don't need recognition. I just need to fly. You'll do both. Because you've earned both." Cross's expression softened slightly. "And Lieutenant, between us, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've seen a lot of pilots. You're one of the best I've encountered. Don't let bureaucracy convince you otherwise." She turned and walked away before Maya could respond. Maya stood alone in the sun, processing words she'd never expected to hear from someone at that level. The rest of the day passed in a blur of administrative tasks, updating records, filing reports, dealing with the endless paperwork that followed any official inquiry. By evening, Maya was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical exertion. She was heading back to her quarters when she passed the flight line. The Apaches sat in their rows exactly as they always did, but one of them caught her eye. Apache 47. Her bird. Still marked with the maintenance tags from yesterday's flight. Chief Vance was there running her evening inspection. She glanced up as Maya approached. "Evening, ma'am." "Chief. How's she looking?" "Perfect as always." Vance wiped her hands on a rag. "Heard the inquiry went well. News traveled fast on a military base." "It did," Maya said. "Cleared of any misconduct. Good. Would have been a crime if it went the other way." Vance gestured at the Apache. "She missed you, I think. The bird flies different when you're in the seat." Maya ran her hand along the fuselage, feeling the smooth metal under her palm. There was a patch near the tail section. New paint. Clean welds. The repair from the Syria mission damage that officially never happened. "Chief," she said quietly. "You knew, didn't you? About the mission suspected." Vance's voice was low. "When they brought this bird in for repairs and classified the whole thing, I knew something major had happened. And when you came back, different, quieter, I figured you'd been through something that changed you. Why didn't you say anything? Wasn't my place. And you didn't need someone else asking questions you couldn't answer." Vance folded the rag and tucked it into her belt. "But I never doubted you, ma'am. Not for a second." Maya felt that tightness in her throat again. "What made you so sure? Because I've been doing this for 25 years. I've seen pilots who crack under pressure. I've seen pilots who freeze. I've seen pilots who shouldn't be anywhere near a combat aircraft. And I've seen the rare ones, the ones who are born for this." Vance met her eyes. "You're one of the rare ones, ma'am. Whatever they told you, whatever they made you believe about yourself, don't let it stick. You're exactly what this army needs." Maya couldn't speak for a moment. When she found her voice, it came out rough. "Thank you, Chief. That means more than you know. Just stating facts, ma'am." Maya nodded and turned to leave. She'd taken 3 steps when Vance's voice stopped her. "Ma'am, one more thing." Maya turned back. Vance's expression had changed. Harder now. More serious. "The hydraulic issue yesterday, on your bird." "What about it? I did my final check at 0530. Pressurization was complete. All systems green." Maya's blood went cold. "You're saying someone tampered with it after your check? I'm saying that when I got to the bird at 0700, the reservoir was at 60%. That doesn't happen by accident." "Do you know who?" Vance shook her head. "I've been asking around. Nobody saw anything. But whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing. Just enough to cause a delay, not enough to be dangerous." Maya's mind was racing. The timing, the grounding, the hydraulic issue that appeared right when she was supposed to fly. It wasn't coincidence. Someone had sabotaged her aircraft. Chief, Maya said slowly, "Who had access to the bird between your check and the pre-flight?" Vance's jaw tightened. "That's what I've been trying to figure out. The flight line was busy, lots of people moving around, but only a handful would know how to manipulate the hydraulic system without leaving obvious signs." Maya stared at her. "You think it was deliberate?" I think somebody wanted you grounded, ma'am. And when the official order came down, they made sure there was a backup plan in case you found a way around it. The implications hit Maya like a physical blow. It wasn't just Colonel Thorne. It wasn't just the classification protocols. Someone on this base had actively worked to destroy her, and they were still here. Chief, she said, her voice hard. Don't tell anyone else about this. Not yet. You think I should keep quiet? I think we need to know who we're dealing with before we make any moves. Vance nodded slowly. Understood, ma'am. But whoever did this, they're not going to stop. You showed them up yesterday. Made them look like fools. People like that don't forgive. They escalate. Maya knew she was right. I'll be careful, she said. Be more than careful, ma'am. Be ready. Maya walked back to her quarters with Vance's words echoing in her head. Someone had sabotaged her aircraft. Someone had wanted her to fail badly enough to risk a malfunction during a NATO demonstration. Why? The obvious answer was the classification. Someone wanted to keep Silent Viper buried, and Maya's continued success was a threat to that. But there was another possibility, one that made her stomach turn. What if it wasn't about the mission at all? What if it was personal? She thought about the pilots who had whispered about her, the officers who had watched her fail, the ones who had seemed almost satisfied when she was grounded. Was one of them capable of sabotage? She reached her quarters and found a package waiting outside her door. No return address, no note. Just a small box wrapped in plain brown paper. Maya picked it up carefully. It was light. No wires, no weight that would suggest anything dangerous. She took it inside and set it on her desk. For a long moment, she just stared at it. Then she opened it. Inside was a single item. A unit patch, the kind that wasn't supposed to exist. Black background, silver Apache silhouette, and beneath it 4 words in crimson thread. Silent Viper, Shadow Flight. Maya's hands trembled as she held it. Someone had made this. Someone who knew what she'd done. Someone who wanted her to have proof that it mattered. But who? And more importantly, were they friend or enemy? She set the patch on her desk next to her flight logs and stared at it until the light faded from her window. Tomorrow, she would find answers. Tonight, she would plan. Because Chief Vance was right. Whoever had come after her wasn't finished. They'd failed yesterday, and people like that didn't accept failure. They came back harder. Maya reached into her locker and pulled out the service pistol she kept there. She checked the magazine chambered around and set it on her nightstand. Then she lay down on her bed fully clothed and waited for morning. Sleep didn't come. The knock came at 0347. Maya was off the bed before the second knock landed pistol in hand back against the wall beside the door. "Who is it, Vance? Open up. It's urgent." Maya checked the peephole. Chief Vance stood alone, her face tight with something that looked like controlled fury. Maya opened the door. Vance stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. She was carrying a tablet and her hands were shaking. "I found something," Vance said. "You need to see this." She handed Maya the tablet. On the screen was a security camera, still grainy but clear enough. A figure stood beside Apache 47. The timestamp read 0612, 48 minutes before the pre-flight briefing. The figure was bent over the hydraulic access panel. "Can you enhance the image?" Maya asked. "Already did." "That's the best we're going to get." Maya studied the figure. Medium build, flight suit. Face turned away from the camera. But there was something familiar about the posture. The way the shoulders hunched, the angle of the head. "I know who that is," Maya said. Vance nodded grimly. "So do I." It was Lieutenant Cole Brennan, the same pilot who had taken her slot, the same pilot who had climbed into her cockpit, the same pilot who had stood on the tarmac looking sick with guilt while Admiral Cross exposed the truth. Maya's grip tightened on the tablet. Why would Brennan sabotage the bird he was about to fly? Vance's jaw worked. That's what I've been trying to figure out. It doesn't make sense. Unless he knew he wasn't going to fly it. Maya's mind was racing. Unless he knew something was going to happen to pull me back in. Unless the sabotage wasn't meant to stop me from flying. It was meant to make me look bad when I did. But Admiral Cross showed up, Vance said. Nobody expected that. No, nobody did. Maya set the tablet down. If Cross hadn't intervened, what would have happened? I would have been stuck in the tower watching Brennan struggle with a hydraulic issue that shouldn't have existed. The demonstration would have been delayed, maybe scrubbed entirely, and everyone would have blamed the bird I'd been training on for 9 months. Vance's eyes narrowed. They weren't just trying to ground you. They were trying to destroy your reputation permanently. But Cross changed everything. She put me back in the cockpit. And when I flew that bird with no issues, it proved the hydraulic problem wasn't mechanical. It was deliberate, which means Brennan knows he's exposed. Maya nodded slowly. He knows. And he knows I'm going to figure it out. Vance stepped closer, her voice dropping. Ma'am, Brennan isn't smart enough to plan this alone. He's a follower. Always has been. Somebody put him up to this. Who? That's what we need to find out. Maya grabbed her jacket. Where is Brennan now? Barracks. Room 214. I checked before I came here. Let's go. They moved through the pre-dawn darkness, 2 shadows cutting across the compound. The base was quiet. A few lights burned in the operations building. A security patrol passed in the distance but didn't see them. Maya's heart was pounding, but her hands were steady. She'd faced worse than this. She'd faced enemy fire and failing engines and the certainty of death. This was just a man. A weak man who had let himself be used. They reached the barracks. Vance took position near the exit while Maya climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor. Room 214. The door was closed. A thin line of light showed underneath. Maya knocked, shuffling inside. A muffled curse. Then Brennan's voice, tight with fear. Who is it? Open the door, Lieutenant. A long pause. Sterling now. The lock clicked. The door opened. Brennan stood there in a t-shirt and shorts, his face pale and drawn. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. What do you want? His voice cracked on the last word. Maya stepped into the room. She didn't touch him, didn't threaten him, just moved close enough that he had to back up. I want to know why, she said quietly. Why what? Don't. Maya's voice was cold. Don't lie to me. Don't waste my time. I know what you did. Brennan's face went white. I don't know what your security camera footage. 0612 yesterday morning. You at my bird accessing the hydraulic system. Brennan's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. That wasn't I didn't, you did. Maya took another step forward. Brennan backed into the wall. What I don't know is why. You were about to fly that bird. Why would you sabotage your own aircraft? It wasn't supposed to. Brennan stopped himself. Wasn't supposed to. What his eyes darted toward the door, toward the window, looking for escape routes that didn't exist. I can't tell you. You're going to tell me. Or I'm going to take that footage to Admiral Cross right now, and you can explain it to a court-martial instead of me. Brennan's face crumpled. You don't understand, he said. His voice was barely a whisper. They'll destroy me. Who I can't? Who, Brennan? He was shaking now, actually trembling. Colonel Thorne, he said, and Major Harlan. They came to me 3 days ago, said they needed my help with something sensitive, said it was a matter of national security. Maya felt something cold settle in her stomach. What did they ask you to do? They said you were a security risk, that the Viper mission had compromised you somehow, that you needed to be kept away from high-profile operations until they could assess the damage. And you believed them. Their command, Brennan said desperately. They have clearance levels I can't even imagine. When a colonel and a major tell you something is classified, you don't ask questions, so you sabotaged my aircraft. They said it wasn't sabotage, just a delay. A technical issue that would push the demonstration back. Give them time to handle the situation properly. Maya's hands clenched into fists. And when Admiral Cross put me back in the cockpit, I almost died, Brennan whispered. I was so sure something was going to go wrong. That the hydraulics were going to fail, and you were going to crash, and it was going to be my fault. But they didn't fail, no, because Chief Vance is too good. She fixed it before anyone could figure out what had happened. Maya stared at him. This pathetic, frightened man who had let himself be used as a weapon against her. Why you? She asked. Why did they pick you for this? Because I was angry. Brennan's voice broke. Because I've been flying for 6 years and I'm still stuck at lieutenant while you, a 20-year-old kid, got assigned to lead the most important demonstration of the year. They knew I was jealous. They used it. Maya felt something shift inside her. Not sympathy, not forgiveness, just a cold understanding of how the system worked. People like Thorne and Harlan didn't do their own dirty work. They found weak links. They exploited resentments. They turned colleagues against each other and then stepped back to watch the destruction. Who else knows about this? Nobody. Just Thorne and Harlan. They made me swear. You're going to tell Admiral Cross everything. I can't. They'll what court-martial you? You're already looking at that. The only question is whether you go down alone or whether you take the people who actually deserve it down with you. Brennan was crying now, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry, he said. I'm so sorry. I knew it was wrong. I knew it from the moment they asked me, but I was so angry and you wanted me to fail. Yes. The word hung in the air between them. Maya could have destroyed him in that moment. Could have reported everything and walked away while his career burned. But that wouldn't get her what she really wanted. Here's what's going to happen, she said. Tomorrow morning you're going to request a meeting with Admiral Cross. You're going to tell her everything. Names, dates, exactly what they asked you to do and why. And if I don't, then I release the footage. And instead of being a cooperating witness, you become the primary suspect. Brennan wiped his face with the back of his hand. What happens to me after? That depends on how honest you are. Maya paused. And how much you're willing to help me take down the people who used you. Brennan looked at her for a long moment. Something changed in his expression. The fear was still there, but underneath it was something else. Resolve. They promised me a promotion, he said. Said if I helped them, they'd fast-track my career. But it was a lie, wasn't it? It's always a lie. Brennan nodded slowly. Okay, I'll do it. I'll tell Cross everything. 800. Don't be late. Maya turned and walked out of the room. Vance was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. Got what you needed? And then some? They walked back across the compound in silence. The sky was starting to lighten in the east. When they reached Maya's quarters, Vance stopped. Ma'am, if Brennan's telling the truth, this goes higher than I thought. Thorne and Harlan aren't acting alone. Somebody above them gave the order to bury you. I know. What are you going to do? I'm going to find out who. Vance nodded, and then Maya's jaw tightened. And then I'm going to make sure they never do this to anyone else. She went inside and sat on her bed. Her hands were shaking now, the adrenaline finally wearing off. She thought about Brennan, about his jealousy, about how easily Thorne and Harlan had turned that jealousy into a weapon. She thought about herself at 20 years old, carrying a secret that was slowly destroying her, while the people who should have protected her used her silence against her. The system was broken. Not just at Fort Ironhawk, everywhere. But she couldn't fix the whole system. She could only fix this. At 07:30, Maya walked into Admiral Cross's office. Cross looked up from her desk. "Lieutenant, you're early." "Ma'am, there's something you need to know." She told Cross everything. The security footage, Brennan's confession, Thorne and Harlan's involvement. Cross listened without interrupting. When Maya finished, she sat back in her chair. "You've been busy. I don't like being a target, ma'am." "Neither do I." Cross stood and walked to the window. "Lieutenant, what you've uncovered is just the tip of the iceberg. Thorne and Harlan are bureaucrats. They don't have the authority or the imagination to orchestrate something like this on their own." "I know, ma'am. Somebody's pulling their strings." "Yes. And I think I know who." Cross turned to face her. 3 weeks before Operation Silent Viper, there was a meeting at the Pentagon. Senior intelligence officials, joint special operations. The discussion was about expanding covert operations in the Syrian border region. Maya's blood ran cold. One person at that meeting argued against the expansion, said the operational security was insufficient, said we were putting assets at risk without proper support structures. "Who, me?" Cross's voice was hard. "I was overruled. The expansion went forward, and 2 weeks later a special forces team was ambushed because the intelligence was compromised and the support structures I warned about weren't in place. The team I rescued." Yes. Maya felt the pieces clicking into place. "They buried me because I'm proof that you were right. They buried you because if your mission became public, it would expose their failures. It would prove that I was right and they were wrong. And people like that don't admit mistakes. They cover them up." Maya's hands clenched. "Who gives the orders, ma'am? Who's at the top of this? A deputy director of intelligence named Wallace Crane." Cross's voice was flat. "He's the one who pushed the expansion through. He's the one who ignored the warnings. And he's the one who ordered your record scrubbed. Then he's the one I need to take down." Cross shook her head. "You can't take him down directly, Lieutenant. He has too much protection, too many allies in Washington. If you go after him openly, he'll destroy you before you get within striking distance." "Then what do I do?" "You do what you've been doing. You tell the truth. You let the system work. The system that buried me for 12 weeks. Cross's expression softened. "The system that also produced me. That produced Admiral Cross, who flew here specifically to expose what was being done to you." She stepped closer. "Lieutenant, I've spent 30 years fighting people like Wallace Crane. I've won some, lost some. But the one thing I've learned is that exposure is their greatest enemy. They survive in shadow. They thrive on silence. The moment their actions become public, they become vulnerable." Maya understood. "Brennan talks to you. You build a case against Thorne and Harlan, and when they fall, they take Crane down with them." "Exactly. What if they don't flip? What if they protect him? Then we keep digging, keep exposing, keep shining light into every corner until there's nowhere left to hide." Maya nodded. "When does Brennan come in?" "In 15 minutes. Then I'd better not be here when he arrives. Actually, I want you to stay." "Ma'am, you're the victim here, Lieutenant. Brennan needs to look you in the eye when he tells his story. He needs to understand the human cost of what he did, and you deserve to hear it directly." Maya's throat tightened. "Yes, ma'am." At 0800 exactly, there was a knock on the door. Brennan entered, looking like a man walking to his execution. When he saw Maya standing beside Admiral Cross's desk, he stopped cold. "Sit down," Lieutenant Cross said. "And tell me everything." Brennan sat, and for the next 45 minutes he talked. He told Cross about the approach from Thorne and Harlan, the manipulation, The lies about national security, the instructions to create a technical fault that would ground the demonstration. He told her about the anger he'd felt toward Maya, the jealousy, the conviction that she didn't deserve the opportunities she'd been given, and he told her about the moment Cross had put Maya back in the cockpit and he'd realized he might have just killed her. I sat in that tower, Brennan said, his voice raw, watching her take off, and I was so sure something was going to go wrong, that the hydraulics were going to fail, that I was going to watch her die. Cross's expression was unreadable, but the sabotage didn't work. No, ma'am. Chief Vance found the issue and fixed it, because Lieutenant Sterling has a crew chief who trusts her, who knew something was wrong and didn't stop until she figured out what. Brennan looked at Maya. "I'm sorry," he said, "for what I did, for what I thought about you, for all of it." Maya met his eyes. "Apologizing to me doesn't fix anything, Lieutenant. What fixes it is making sure the people who used you face consequences." Brennan nodded. "Whatever you need. Whatever it takes." Cross stood. "Lieutenant Brennan, you're confined to quarters pending investigation. You will speak to no one about this conversation. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am?" Dismissed. Brennan stood saluted and left. When the door closed behind him, Cross turned to Maya. "That took courage," she said, watching him confess, not lashing out. Maya shrugged. "He's not the enemy, ma'am. He's just a weapon they used." "Exactly right. And now he's a weapon we can use instead. What's the next step?" Cross picked up her phone. "The next step is I make some calls. Thorne and Harlan are about to have a very bad day." Maya almost smiled. "And Crane's day is coming too. I just need to gather a few more pieces first." She looked at Maya with something like respect. "You've handled this well, Lieutenant. Better than most people twice your age would have. I learned from good teachers, ma'am." Cross nodded. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we start taking names." Maya saluted and left. As she walked across the compound, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. The people who had tried to destroy her were about to face the consequences of their actions, not because of violence or revenge, but because of truth. Truth was the most powerful weapon she had, and she was just getting started. The arrests came at dawn. Maya was in the mess hall when she heard the sirens, military police vehicles rolling across the compound, lights flashing, doors slamming. She set down her coffee and walked outside. A crowd had gathered near the administration building. Pilots, crew chiefs, officers, everyone watching as Colonel Marcus Thorne was led out in handcuffs. His face was gray, his uniform disheveled. He walked with the broken gait of a man who knew his career was over. Major Victor Harlan followed 30 seconds later. He was fighting, struggling against the MPs who held his arms, shouting something about authority and jurisdiction and lawyers. Nobody was listening. Maya watched from the edge of the crowd. She felt nothing. No satisfaction. No triumph. Just a cold, quiet certainty that justice was finally being served. Chief Vance appeared beside her. "Heard they found evidence of 2 other pilots they tried to bury," Vance said quietly. "Same pattern. Outstanding performance followed by sudden career destruction." Maya's jaw tightened. "How many careers did they destroy?" "We may never know. But it's over now." "Is it?" Vance looked at her. "What do you mean?" Maya watched Harlan being forced into the back of an MP vehicle. "Thorne and Harlan are pawns," she said. "The real enemy is still in Washington." "Crane." "Yes. You think he's going to get away with it?" Maya turned to face her. "Not if I have anything to say about it." 2 hours later, she was sitting in Admiral Cross's office again. Cross had a phone pressed to her ear, her expression tight with controlled fury. "I don't care what protocols he's invoking," she said into the phone. "I have sworn testimony from 2 Army officers implicating him directly. Either you bring him in for questioning or I go to the Senate Armed Services Committee myself." A pause. "Good. Tomorrow morning. I'll be there." She hung up and looked at Maya. "Crane's agreed to testify," she said. "Voluntary appearance before a closed-door Intelligence Committee hearing. That sounds like he's trying to control the narrative." "Of course he is. Men like Crane never face consequences directly. They lawyer up, they spin, they sacrifice subordinates to protect themselves. So what do? Cross leaned back in her chair. "We give the committee something they can't spin, something that makes Crane's version of events impossible to believe. What do you have in mind?" "You, Lieutenant." Maya stared at her. "Ma'am, I want you to testify, in person. Tell the committee exactly what happened in Syria, what you did, what it cost you, and how your record was suppressed to protect the people who failed you." Maya's heart was pounding. Testifying meant going public. It meant putting her face on this story. It meant becoming a target for everyone who wanted to keep the truth buried. "Ma'am, if I testify, there's no going back. I know. My career will never be the same. Your career was already destroyed once, Lieutenant. This is your chance to rebuild it on your own terms." Maya was quiet for a long moment. She thought about the 12 weeks of silence, the whispers, the isolation, the slow grinding destruction of everything she'd worked for. She thought about Brennan, who had been used as a weapon against her because of jealousy and weakness. She thought about Thorne and Harlan, who had built their careers on burying people like her. And she thought about all the other pilots out there, the ones who had been silenced, the ones who had been destroyed, the ones who would never get the chance she was being offered. "I'll do it," she said. Cross nodded. "I knew you would." The hearing was scheduled for 3 days later. Maya spent those 3 days preparing. Cross brought in lawyers, intelligence analysts, military historians who could put her mission in context. They walked her through every question she might face, every attack the committee members might launch, every attempt to discredit her testimony or twist her words. By the time she boarded the military transport to Washington, Maya felt like she'd already fought a war. The hearing room was smaller than she'd expected. A long table at the front where 7 senators sat with staff members and lawyers. A witness table in the center with a single chair and a microphone. Cameras positioned along the walls recording everything for the classified record. Maya wore her dress uniform. Every ribbon, every insignia in place. She looked like what she was, a combat pilot who had earned every honor she wore. Admiral Cross sat in the gallery behind her, a silent presence that said more than words. The committee chairman, Senator William Archer, called the hearing to order. "Lieutenant Sterling," he said, "you understand that the testimony you give today is classified at the highest level. You are not to discuss any aspect of these proceedings outside this room." "I understand, sir." "Good. Let's begin." For the next 2 hours, Maya told her story. She told them about the patrol, the emergency beacon, the decision to deviate from her mission parameters. She told them about the firefight, the extraction, the desperate flight home with failing engines and minimal fuel. She told them about the aftermath, the debriefing, the order to stay silent, the systematic destruction of her reputation by people who should have protected her. She told them everything. The senators listened in silence. A few took notes. Most just watched her with expressions that ranged from shock to admiration to something that looked like shame. When she finished, Senator Archer leaned forward. "Lieutenant," he said, "you're describing a coordinated effort to suppress information about a successful combat mission. A mission that saved 7 American lives." "Yes, sir. And you're saying this suppression was ordered by Deputy Director Crane. I'm saying that Colonel Thorne and Major Harlan both testified under oath that their instructions came from Director Crane's office. Did you ever speak with Director Crane directly? No, sir. I was never given that opportunity. Archer nodded. Director Crane, you've heard Lieutenant Sterling's testimony. Do you have a response? Maya turned her head. Wallace Crane sat at a separate table to her left. He was a trim man in his late 50s, silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of face that belonged on magazine covers and political fundraisers. He looked completely composed. Senator Crane said smoothly, Lieutenant Sterling is clearly an exceptional pilot who performed admirably under difficult circumstances. However, her characterization of the classification decisions is incomplete. In what way? The decision to suppress her record was made for legitimate national security reasons. The mission she flew exposed intelligence capabilities that we cannot afford to have known by our adversaries. So you're not denying that you ordered her record suppressed. I'm saying that the suppression was appropriate given the circumstances. Even though it destroyed her career, Crane didn't blink. Careers are secondary to national security. Senator. Maya felt something cold settle in her stomach. He was going to get away with it. He was going to sit there and justify everything, and the committee was going to let him. Then Admiral Cross stood up. Senator, if I may. Archer looked surprised. Admiral Cross. This is highly irregular. Sir, I have evidence directly relevant to Director Crane's testimony. What kind of evidence? Cross walked to the front of the room and handed a folder to the committee aide. 3 weeks before Operation Silent Viper, she said I attended a meeting at the Pentagon where Director Crane argued for expanding covert operations in the Syrian border region. I opposed that expansion because the operational security was insufficient. Crane's face went very still. Director Crane overruled my objections. Cross continued. The expansion went forward. 2 weeks later, a special forces team was ambushed because the intelligence was compromised, and the support structures I warned about weren't in place. Senator Archer was reading the documents. These are the meeting minutes. Yes, sir. And my formal objection filed 3 days before the operation was approved. Director Crane's face had gone pale. Admiral, those documents are classified. They were classified. Cross agreed. I obtained authorization to declassify them this morning. From whom? The Secretary of Defense. The room went silent. Senator Archer looked up from the documents. Director Crane, it appears that Admiral Cross warned you specifically about the risks of this operation. And you approved it anyway. The intelligence assessment at the time, the intelligence assessment was wrong. 7 men nearly died because you ignored a senior officer's warnings, and then you buried the pilot who saved them to cover your mistake. That's not Director Crane. Archer's voice was hard. I've heard enough. He turned to the other committee members. I'm calling for a formal investigation into Director Crane's handling of Operation Silent Viper and related missions. All in favor? 6 hands went up. The motion carries. Director Crane, you're relieved of your duties pending the outcome of this investigation. Please surrender your credentials to committee security. Crane's face twisted. You can't do this. It's done. 2 security officers stepped forward. For the first time, Crane looked at Maya. His eyes were full of something that might have been hatred or fear or both. You have no idea what you've started, he said quietly. Maya met his gaze without flinching. I know exactly what I've started, sir. The truth. They led him out of the room. Maya sat at the witness table, her hands trembling slightly, her heart pounding. It was over. 12 weeks of silence. 12 weeks of doubt and isolation and quiet destruction. And now it was over. Admiral Cross appeared beside her. You did well, Lieutenant. Maya looked up at her. Did we win? We won this battle. There will be others. Maya nodded slowly. I know. Cross put a hand on her shoulder. Come on. I'll buy you a drink. They walked out of the hearing room together. 3 weeks later, Maya stood in front of 45 pilots at Fort Ironhawk Air Station. She'd been promoted to captain. It wasn't just a recognition of her service. It was a public acknowledgement of what had been done to her and a commitment that it would never happen again. The ceremony was short. Admiral Cross pinned the new insignia to her collar. Cameras flashed. People applauded. When it was over, Maya stepped up to the microphone. She looked out at the faces watching her. Gareth and Inez, Chief Vance, Lieutenant Brennan, who had been allowed to remain in service as a material witness and was slowly rebuilding his own career. I'm not going to give a speech, Maya said. I'm not good at speeches. But I want to say one thing. She paused, gathering her thoughts. What happened to me wasn't unique. It happens all the time. People who do their jobs well, who sacrifice everything for the mission, who carry burdens they're not allowed to talk about. And then they watch their careers get destroyed because the truth is inconvenient for people with more power than conscience. The room was absolutely silent. I survived because Admiral Cross was willing to speak up, because Chief Vance never stopped believing in me, because even Lieutenant Brennan, who made mistakes, found the courage to tell the truth when it mattered. She looked at Brennan. He nodded, his eyes bright. But there are others who didn't survive. Others who were buried so deep, they'll never dig themselves out. And the only way we honor them is by making sure it doesn't happen again. Maya straightened her shoulders. So here's what I'm asking. If you see something wrong, speak up. If you see someone being destroyed unfairly, say something. If you're carrying a burden that's killing you inside, find someone you trust and share it. She paused. Because silence protects the people who hurt us. And the only weapon we have against them is the truth. She stepped back from the microphone. The applause started slowly. Chief Vance first, then Gareth, then Inez, then the whole room, a wave of sound that washed over Maya like something physical. She stood there and let it wash over her. Not because she wanted recognition, because she understood finally that this wasn't just about her. It was about everyone who had been silenced, everyone who had been destroyed, everyone who had carried impossible burdens without breaking. She was their voice now, and she would not be silent again. That evening, Maya walked to the flight line one last time. Apache 47 sat in its usual spot, rotors still waiting for the next mission. Chief Vance had just finished her evening inspection. She looked up as Maya approached. Heard the ceremony went well, ma'am. It did. You know you didn't have to mention me. I was just doing my job. Maya smiled. So was I, Chief. That's the point. Vance was quiet for a moment. What happens now? She asked. Maya looked at the Apache, at the machine that had carried her through fire and brought her home. I keep flying, she said. I keep training the next generation. I keep telling the truth even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. And the people who tried to destroy you, thorns facing court-martial. Harlan took a plea deal. Crane's investigation is ongoing, but Admiral Cross says it doesn't look good for him. Good. They deserve whatever they get. Maya nodded. They do. She reached out and touched the Apache's fuselage. The metal was warm from the day's heat. Chief, can I ask you something? Anything, ma'am. That first day when you saw the damage from Syria, when you suspected something had happened, why didn't you ask me about it? Vance was quiet for a long moment. Because I've been doing this a long time, she said finally. And I've learned that some burdens are too heavy to share until the person carrying them is ready. You weren't ready then. You just needed someone to believe in you while you figured out how to carry it. Maya felt her throat tighten. Thank you, Chief. For everything. Vance smiled. Thank me by being the pilot I know you are, ma'am. That's all I've ever asked. Maya climbed into the cockpit of Apache 47. She didn't have a mission. No orders, no target, no objective. She just needed to fly. She powered up the engines. The turbines spooled with that familiar whine. The rotors began to turn. Tower, this is Apache 47, she said into the radio, requesting clearance for training flight. 47. You're cleared. Flight path Delta. Sunset approach. Roger that, Tower. 47 out. She lifted off. The Apache rose into the evening sky, climbing through layers of gold and orange light. Below her, Fort Ironhawk grew smaller. The barracks. The administration building. The flight line where everything had changed. Maya banked toward the west, toward the setting sun. She thought about the last 3 months. The mission that started everything. The silence that nearly destroyed her. The people who had fought to bury her and the people who had fought to save her. She thought about Admiral Cross, who had risked her own career to expose the truth. She thought about Chief Vance, who had believed in her when no one else would. She thought about Brennan, who had found the courage to admit his mistakes and help bring down the people who had used him. And she thought about herself. 20 years old. The youngest Apache pilot in Army aviation history. A combat veteran. A survivor. A voice. The desert stretched out beneath her, endless and beautiful. The same desert where she'd flown her first training mission, where she'd earned her wings, where she'd learned what it meant to sacrifice everything for something bigger than yourself. She was part of it now, part of a story that went back generations. Pilots who had fought and died and carried burdens nobody would ever know about. But her burden was different. Her burden was light now, because she'd learned the most important lesson a soldier could learn. Silence was a weapon that could destroy you, but truth was a weapon that could set you free. Maya pushed the throttle forward and climbed higher. The sun was setting, painting the sky in colors that made her heart ache with something she couldn't name. She flew toward it, not because she was running from anything, but because she finally understood what she was flying toward. The future. Her future. A future where she would never be silent again. Because some battles are fought in the open with fire and steel and the roar of engines. And some battles are fought in silence, with nothing but the truth and the courage to speak it. Maya Sterling had fought both kinds, and she had won. If you've ever carried a burden no one understood, if you've ever been silenced when you deserved to be heard, if you've ever watched someone take credit for your sacrifice while you stood in the shadows, know this: your story matters. Your truth matters. And someday, someone will speak your name with the respect you've always deserved. Share this story for everyone who was never given a voice. Subscribe if you believe that truth will always find a way to surface, no matter how deep they try to bury it. Because the sky has no ceiling for those brave enough to fly. And Maya Sterling was born to fly.